Welcome back to The Ansplain. I'm Edward.
I'm Lily.
And today we're going to be diving deep into the Canadian political scene and get ready for a wild ride because the upcoming spring 2025 federal election is shaping up to be a real nail-biter.
Oh, yeah. It's a showdown for the ages, really. We've got political newcomer Mark Carney squaring off against seasoned veteran Pierre Poilievre for the prime minister position.
That's right. And we're not talking about just another election here. This is a clash of titans, a battle of ideas, and a glimpse into the future of Canadian politics.
A glimpse into the future.
Before we get started, don't forget to check out www.dansplain.xyz for all the latest episodes, articles, and even some exclusive Dansplain merch.
Oh, nice.
We got you covered.
All right, so let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Imagine a political novice with zero experience in elected office suddenly becoming the prime minister.
Right.
That's exactly what's happening with Mark Carney. He's the leader of the Liberal Party and the current prime minister designate, even though he just entered the political arena.
It's a pretty unconventional path to power, that's for sure. This isn't your typical politician climbing the ranks.
No.
We're talking about a guy who led both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, navigated the 2008 financial crisis, and even tackled Brexit. And to top it off, he's been a UN envoy on climate change.
Wow.
Those are some serious credentials.
It's almost like he's stepped out of a political thriller novel.
Yeah.
He's got this air of the outsider coming to save the day. But the question is, can his economic expertise and international experience translate into political success? That's the gamble the Liberal Party took choosing him after Justin Trudeau stepped down and while he won the leadership race with a landslide 86% of the vote. That doesn't necessarily guarantee him the prime minister's seat.
That's a good point. It's one thing to win over party loyalists. It's another thing entirely to convince the entire country, especially when you consider the controversies swirling around Carney.
Oh.
There are those whispers of elitism stemming from his estimated $30 million net worth and his previous role at Brookfield Asset Management, which, under his watch, moved its headquarters to New York, that doesn't exactly scream man of the people.
You hit the nail on the head. And let's not forget those alleged lies that surfaced during his campaign.
Oh, right.
Like claiming credit for Canada's response to the 2008 financial crisis, even though many experts attribute the success to Jim Flaherty, the finance minister at the time. And then there's the claim about his involvement in balancing the 1998 budget, a claim quickly debunked since he was studying in the UK back then. These allegations, whether true or not, have definitely put a dent in his credibility.
It makes you wonder how much those controversies will impact voters' decisions. I mean, on the one hand, you have a guy with an impressive resume who's tackled global crises, but on the other hand, there are these questions about his honesty and his connection with everyday Canadians.
It's a fascinating dilemma for voters, wouldn't you say? Do they prioritize experience and perceived competence? Or are they swayed by those allegations and the elitist label? It's a classic case of weighing the pros and cons, and ultimately, it comes down to what resonates most with individual voters.
Now let's talk about the opponent in this political chess match, Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
This guy's a seasoned politician with over 20 years of experience in Parliament.
Right.
He's known for his sharp wit, his aggressive debating style, and his strong digital presence, particularly on X.
He's definitely a force to be reckoned with. Poilievre knows how to work a crowd, command attention, and connect with voters, particularly online. This election is shaping up to be a stark contrast in styles. We've got Carney, the economist superstar with global experience but no political background, going head-to-head with Poilievre, the seasoned political brawler who knows the ins and outs of the Canadian political landscape.
It's a fascinating dynamic. You could almost say it's like David versus Goliath, but with the roles reversed.
Yeah, I see that.
You've got the newcomer, Carney, wielding his economic expertise and outsider appeal, while Poilievre relies on his political savvy and experience.
Interesting.
And let's not forget the context of this election. This isn't just a domestic political squabble.
Right.
This is happening against the backdrop of a rather volatile relationship with the United States, thanks to President Trump's threats to annex Canada and impose tariffs.
Oh, wow.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah.
And both candidates have to navigate this international tension carefully.
Absolutely. This adds another layer of complexity to the election. Carney is trying to position himself as the steady hand Canada needs in these uncertain times, emphasizing his experience with global crises and his potential to handle Trump. But Poilievre might play the nationalism card, questioning Carney's loyalty to Canada given his international background and wealth.
It's a classic political strategy, appealing to nationalistic sentiment and portraying the opponent as an outsider who's not truly one of us. How this plays out will be interesting to watch. Will voters prioritize economic expertise and stability in dealing with Trump, or will they be swayed by appeals to national pride and a more aggressive stance towards the U.S.?
It's a tough choice for sure, and to add another layer of intrigue, Canadian political history holds some cautionary tales for newcomers like Carney Remember, John Turner, and Kim Campbell. Both were relatively inexperienced leaders who suffered crushing defeats in their bids for prime minister.
Yeah.
Their stories serve as a reminder that experience or the lack thereof can be a major factor in Canadian politics. Turner, in particular, struggled to step out of the shadow of his predecessor, Pierre Trudeau. Can Carney avoid a similar fate, establishing his own identity and proving he's more than just a continuation of the previous Liberal government?
That's a crucial question. He needs to convince voters that he's not just a product of the establishment, but a leader with his own vision for the country. And speaking of visions, let's dive into the key issues that are likely to dominate this election.
Okay.
Buckle up, folks, because things are about to get interesting.
I'm ready. Welcome back to Dansplain. We're digging deeper into the Canadian federal election, where the battle between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre is heating up.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already. Carney's surprising entry into politics, the controversies dogging him, and the major issues shaping this election. But now, let's shift gears and explore the psychological forces at play in this political showdown.
Okay.
It's time to delve into the minds of Canadian voters.
That's right. Understanding the psychology of voting can be crucial in deciphering why people choose one candidate over another. We often think elections are all about policies and platforms, but the reality is that our decisions are influenced by a whole range of psychological factors, often without us even realizing it.
So are you saying our brains are playing tricks on us when we step into that voting booth?
Not necessarily tricks, but our brains do use shortcuts to process information quickly, especially when faced with complex choices like who to vote for. These shortcuts, called cognitive biases, can sometimes lead us to make decisions that aren't entirely rational or objective.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these cognitive biases and how they might be influencing voters in this Canadian election.
Well, one of the most common biases is confirmation bias. This is our tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs and to ignore or downplay information that contradicts them. It's like we have these mental filters that block out anything that challenges our worldview.
So if I already have a favorable view of, say, Mark Carney, I'm more likely to dismiss those allegations of elitism or dishonesty as just political attacks, while a Poilievre supporter might see them as proof that Carney is untrustworthy.
Exactly. Confirmation bias is incredibly powerful, and it's especially prevalent in today's world where we're bombarded with information from all sides. It's easy to get caught up in our own echo chambers, surrounding ourselves with news and opinions that reinforce our existing beliefs.
And how does this play out in the context of the election?
Well, imagine you're a voter who's undecided about who to support. You're scrolling through your social media feed and you see a post praising Carney's economic expertise. If you're already leaning towards him, you're more likely to share that post, further solidifying your positive view of him. Conversely, if you see a negative article about Poilievre's stance on immigration and you already have reservations about him, you might be quick to accept that information as truth without critically evaluating it.
So it's like our biases create these self-fulfilling prophecies, leading us to seek out information that reinforces our preconceived notions, making it even harder to change our minds.
Precisely. And this can make it very difficult to have productive political conversations and to engage with different perspectives. We become so entrenched in our own beliefs that we dismiss anything that challenges them as fake news or propaganda.
That's a real problem, especially in a democracy where open dialogue and debate are crucial. So how can we overcome this confirmation bias and become more informed voters?
It's a challenge, but it starts with being aware of our own biases. We need to recognize that we all have these mental shortcuts, and we need to actively seek out information that challenges our existing views.
So don't just read headlines that you agree with. Actually delve into articles from different sources, even those that might make you uncomfortable.
Exactly. Expose yourself to different perspectives. Talk to people who hold different views and be willing to question your own assumptions. It's not about abandoning your beliefs, but about ensuring they're based on a well-rounded understanding of the issues.
Solid advice. Now, what about other cognitive biases that might be at play in this election?
Another common one is availability bias, which is our tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled, often because they are vivid or recent. For example, if there's been a recent high-profile scandal involving a conservative politician, voters might be more likely to view all conservative candidates as untrustworthy, even if there's no evidence to support that generalization.
So it's like that old saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch. But in this case, it's our brains making those associations based on easily recalled information.
Exactly. Availability bias can be particularly potent during election campaigns, where candidates often try to exploit it to their advantage.
So how might Carney and Poilievre be using availability bias in their campaigns?
Well, Poilievre, for example, might focus on highlighting recent economic challenges, emphasizing job losses or rising inflation to make voters feel anxious about the state of the economy. This could make them more receptive to his message of economic conservatism and his promises to cut taxes and reduce government spending.
So he's playing on people's fears and anxieties to make his solutions seem more appealing.
In a way, yes, he's trying to make those negative economic experiences more salient in voters' minds, making them more likely to associate those problems with the current liberal government and more likely to vote for change.
That's a pretty clever tactic. And what about Carney? How might he be using availability bias?
Well, Carney might highlight his experience navigating the 2008 financial crisis, emphasizing his role in stabilizing the Canadian economy during a time of global turmoil. This can make voters feel more confident in his ability to handle the current economic challenges, particularly those stemming from the trade tensions with the U.S.
So it's a battle of narratives, each candidate trying to frame the issues in a way that benefits them and triggers specific emotional responses in voters.
Precisely, and it's not always about deliberate manipulation. Politicians are always trying to connect with voters on an emotional level, and availability bias provides a powerful tool for doing so.
Now let's shift our focus to the candidates themselves. Does their psychology play a role in how voters perceive them?
Absolutely. The personalities, leadership styles, and even the physical appearances of the candidates can significantly influence how voters perceive them, often subconsciously.
So it's not just about their policies. Voters are also making judgments based on gut feelings and first impressions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, some studies suggest that voters are more influenced by a candidate's personality than by their policy positions, especially those who are less politically engaged or who don't have the time or inclination to delve into the intricacies of each candidate's platform.
That's fascinating. So it's all about likability and trust. We vote for the person we'd rather have a beer with, so to speak.
Well, it's not always that simple, but likability and trust do play a significant role. Voters are looking for someone they can relate to, someone they believe is competent and trustworthy, and these judgments are often made quickly based on limited information.
So first impressions really do matter in politics. Now, let's apply this to Carney and Poilievre.
Yeah.
How do their personalities compare, and how might that influence voters' perceptions?
Well, Carney is often described as intelligent, articulate, and experienced. He's got that calm, reassuring presence that some voters find appealing, especially those who are looking for stability and competence in uncertain times.
So he's the steady hand at the wheel, the experienced captain navigating the ship through stormy seas.
Exactly. But some voters might also find him a bit aloof or out of touch. Remember those accusations of elitism stemming from his wealth and international background?
Right, those could definitely be liabilities, especially for voters who are struggling economically or who feel that the system isn't working for them.
And what about Poilievre? What's his personality like?
Well, he's often described as more of a firebrand. He's energetic, charismatic, and not afraid to speak his mind, even if it ruffles some feathers.
He's definitely the more fiery of the two, and that can be both an asset and a liability. He appeals to voters who are looking for a change, who are tired of the status quo, and who want a leader who isn't afraid to shake things up.
But his aggressive debating style and his strong opinions could also alienate some voters, especially those who prefer a more conciliatory approach.
That's a valid point. It's a delicate balancing act for any politician, finding that sweet spot between appealing to their base and appealing to a broader electorate.
So we've got two very different personalities vying for the top job. How do you think that will play out with voters? Who will they connect with more?
It's hard to say for sure. It really depends on the mood of the electorate. Are voters looking for stability and experience, or are they looking for change and a fresh perspective? Are they drawn to Carney's calm demeanor and international experience, or are they more attracted to Poilievre's fiery rhetoric and populist appeal? These are the questions that will ultimately decide the election.
It's a fascinating psychological battle for the hearts and minds of Canadians, and it's a reminder that elections are about more than just policies and platforms. They're about connecting with voters on an emotional level, tapping into their hopes, fears, and aspirations, and understanding those underlying psychological dynamics can be key to deciphering the often unpredictable world of politics.
Well said. And remember, this is just a glimpse into the complex world of political psychology. There's so much more to explore, and we encourage you to delve deeper into these fascinating topics on your own. But for now, let's move on to another crucial aspect of this election, the role of the media in shaping public opinion and influencing voters' decisions.
Welcome back to Dansplain. We're in the final stretch of our deep dive into the Canadian federal election, a race that's tighter than a beaver's tail.
Oh, absolutely. We've analyzed the candidates, dissected their platforms, and even explored the psychological forces at play in this election. But now let's look ahead and consider the potential outcomes of this political showdown.
Okay, let's play a little game of what if Mark Carney, the political rookie, manages to pull off a victory against Pierre Poilievre, the seasoned veteran. What would a Carney win signal for Canada?
A Carney victory would be quite a statement. It would suggest that Canadian voters prioritized his economic expertise and global experience over Poilievre's populist appeal and his deep roots in Canadian politics.
So it would be a vote for competence over charisma, a belief that an outsider can still navigate the complexities of government and deliver results.
Exactly. It would also suggest that voters weren't swayed by those accusations of elitism or those allegations of dishonesty. They would be putting their faith in Carney's leadership, despite his wealth and international ties, believing that he's the best person to guide Canada through these turbulent times.
It would be fascinating to see how a Carney government would approach those key issues we discussed earlier. He's talked about diversifying trade partners, investing in affordable housing, and tackling climate change. But a lot would depend on whether he secures a majority government or has to form a coalition, right?
Absolutely. A majority government gives him more freedom to enact his agenda. But a coalition requires compromise and negotiation with other parties. It could lead to a more moderate approach, incorporating ideas from different political perspectives.
Okay, that's scenario one, Carney as prime minister. Now let's flip the script. What happens if Poilievre emerges victorious? What would a Poilievre win tell us about the mood of the Canadian electorate?
A Poilievre victory would paint a very different picture. It would suggest that Canadian voters resonated more with his brand of conservatism, his focus on economic freedom, his tough stance on immigration, and his skepticism of climate change policies.
So it would be a vote for a more traditional approach, a return to conservative values, and a rejection of the more globalist progressive agenda that Carney represents.
Precisely. It might also indicate that voters were more concerned about the perceived inexperience of Carney, feeling that Poilievre's deep knowledge of Canadian politics and his years of experience in Parliament would be more valuable in navigating the challenges ahead.
And let's not forget Poilievre's mastery of social media and his ability to connect with voters online that could have played a significant role in swaying public opinion.
For sure.
Now, Poilievre government would likely prioritize those conservative policies that we discussed, tax cuts, deregulation, a smaller role for government in the economy. But he'd also face the challenge of reconciling those fiscal goals with his promises to protect social programs. It would be a delicate balancing act.
Definitely.
And how would he approach the volatile relationship with the U.S.? He's criticized some of Trump's policies, but he's also emphasized the importance of the U.S.-Canada relationship. It's a tricky situation trying to stand up to a bully without jeopardizing crucial economic ties.
Exactly. And his stance on climate change would likely be a major point of contention, particularly given the growing concern among Canadians about the impact of climate change on their lives and livelihoods.
So we've got these two clear scenarios. Carney leading a more progressive, globally engaged Canada, or Poilievre steering the country in a more conservative, inward-focused direction. But what about the wild card? What happens if neither candidate secures a majority, resulting in a hung parliament?
That's where things get really interesting. A hung parliament throws a wrench into the works, forcing parties to negotiate and form coalitions to reach that magic number of seats needed to govern.
So it becomes a game of political chess, with each party trying to leverage its position to secure the best possible outcome for itself and its constituents.
Yeah. And it could lead to some unexpected alliances as parties with differing ideologies find common ground on certain issues to form a workable government. And the final outcome might not perfectly reflect the popular vote, as a party with fewer votes overall could end up wielding significant power within the coalition.
It would be a fascinating spectacle to watch those negotiations unfold, to see how the different parties jockey for position and try to shape the agenda of the new government. But regardless of who wins, whether it's a clear victory or a messy coalition, this election has far-reaching implications for Canada's future.
Absolutely. This election is about more than just personalities or policies. It's a referendum on Canada's identity and its place in the world. It's about how they navigate a rapidly changing global landscape, how they address pressing economic and social challenges, and how they balance national interests with international cooperation.
And their relationship with the U.S. will continue to be a defining factor in their foreign policy. No matter who's at the helm, the next prime minister will have to navigate that relationship carefully, finding ways to cooperate with the U.S. while also standing up for Canadian values and interests.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure, but ultimately this election is a reminder that democracy is a process, not a destination. It's about ongoing dialogue, debate, and compromise, and it's up to each and every citizen to stay informed, engage in the process, and hold their elected officials accountable.
Well said. And folks, as always, we encourage you to continue exploring these issues, to delve deeper into the complexities of Canadian politics, and to form your own informed opinions. And remember, you can find a wealth of resources, analysis, and different perspectives over at www.densplain.xyz. We're here to help you navigate this crazy world and to make sense of the issues that matter most.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Canadian federal election. It's been a wild ride, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for our neighbors to the north. Until next time, keep on dansplaining.
Yeah.